The story begins as the Silver Wing party faces off against a massive dragon, but even their combined strength is no match for the beast. It whips its tail through the air with deadly precision, and the group members are forced to jump to avoid the crushing blow. They counter with their most powerful attacks, but their weapons are no match against the dragon's thick hide. The dragon gathers energy to launch a strong attack, but the group's mage quickly raises a barrier to protect the party. However, it isn't strong enough to completely block the devastating attack. As the shield breaks, the party's cook, Dennis, rushes forward and uses his own body to shield the mage from the dragon's flames. A flame brushes her arm, so he quickly prepares a magic potion for her, advising her not to lose focus, which relieves the party's vice captain, Katie, because Dennis always has their back. However, the party leader, Vigo, doesn't seem impressed by Dennis's display of compassion. Instead, he seems to be irritated. Vigo channels his frustration into a devastating attack that strikes the dragon directly in its eye, causing the massive creature to roar in pain. The injury sends the dragon into a complete berserker rage, and it begins attacking everything in sight with unpredictable movements. They manage to survive the chaotic assault, and Vigo shouts at his team to stay strong because they are the strongest party in the world. After that, the scene shifts to Silver Wing's meeting hall, where all the party members have gathered around a large table. Except for Katie, Dennis asks why Vigo called this meeting, so Vigo places all the blame for their recent failure on Dennis's shoulders, claiming that if Dennis hadn't used his dread voice ability, the dragon wouldn't have fled, and they would have been able to defeat it properly. Dennis calmly reminds Vigo that he was the one who ordered him to use that specific skill, but Vigo refuses to accept responsibility for his commands and continues to berate Dennis for the outcome. Dennis remembers how their goal was to defeat the dragon and harvest its rare materials for profit, but when the dragon suddenly entered a frenzied state, it made it very dangerous for them to continue the battle, since most of them were already injured, and they were looking at an imminent defeat. Vigo ordered Dennis to use the intimidation skill Dread Voice, which could frighten enemies. Dennis followed the command and successfully sent the dragon running away from the battlefield. Although this decision ended the quest in failure, it also saved everyone's lives. Dennis admits that he was surprised by Vigo's uncharacteristically good judgment at the time, but now that he is seeing his true nature, he hasn't changed. Vigo completely denies giving such an order and goes even further by suggesting that Dennis might have been sent to infiltrate their party as a spy from a rival group who wants to tarnish Silver Wing's reputation. He tells Dennis to leave their party, and none of the other members speak up to defend him because they're all afraid of the president. Vigo then delivers a cruel speech about how Dennis was never worthy of being in their elite party because he's just a cook, and the Silver Wing battalion is meant for highly skilled swordsmen, priests, and magicians. He notes that although they both have reached level 99, a lowly cook like Dennis has no place among true warriors. Dennis realizes that there's no point in staying there any longer, so he tells them to do whatever they want because they're not his problem anymore. He walks out of the room with his head held high, leaving behind his former party that he had served faithfully for so long. A little while later, Dennis walks through the busy streets of the capital city, thinking about how he will have to say goodbye to this place as well. A young girl accidentally bumps into him and lets go of her balloon, which starts floating up, and she begins to cry. Dennis quickly catches the balloon and returns it to her, saying that she shouldn't let go of things that are important to her. Meanwhile, Vigo watches from a distance as Dennis leaves, and he smiles coldly as he prepares to put his real plan into motion. Just as Dennis is about to leave the city, Katie appears and tries to stop him from leaving. Despite others not acknowledging Dennis's role in the party, Katie knows that he played a key role, since he handled all the important tasks like medicines, alchemy, and cooking food. Dennis believes someone else will take over his responsibilities, but Katie explains that after he joined the party, their ability to explore dangerous dungeons increased dramatically, and now people are calling them the strongest party in the world. She knows that the rest of the party doesn't realize how much Dennis supports them from behind the scenes, but she knows his true importance. Katie desperately tries to convince Dennis to come back, and when that doesn't work, she asks him to at least cook one last dinner for her, or prepare a few lunches for them as well. Dennis can't believe that this is all she thinks about, so Katie gets serious and asks him if he's really leaving forever. When Dennis remains silent, Katie asks what he's going to do with his life now. Dennis explains that he's going to continue cooking because that's his job, and he reveals that he's planning to start his own restaurant. Katie doesn't wish for him to leave, so she once again tries to stop him, claiming that she is the one who found him and that he belongs to her. Dennis is grateful that Katie invited him to join Silver Wing, and he reflects reflects on how well they got along together, which he believes is the reason Vigo kicked him out, since he was interested in Katie romantically. Dennis apologizes to Katie and walks away, and even when she tries to order him to come back using her authority as vice captain, he doesn't even flinch because he knows that his life as an adventurer is over, but his life as a cook has just begun. A few hours later, Dennis just made his way to a new city, where he's shopping for supplies to start his new restaurant. He discovers an amazing box in one of the shops that can cool anything without ice, and the shopkeeper explains that it's called an ice box, and it's essential for every restaurant. Dennis gets excited about buying it, but then he remembers reading in his favorite book, How to Open a Restaurant, that he should avoid unnecessary purchases and keep his investment as low as possible. He decides not to buy the icebox because he can use ice magic instead. According to the guidelines of the book, he buys an abandoned property, communicates with distributors about procuring raw materials, and purchases the necessary utensils. After completing all these tasks, he thinks about how much fun this process is, and he is getting closer to his dream. The next tip from the book is not to take up everything on his own, as he can't serve all the customers, so he decides to hire a helper. Just then, he notices a crowd gathering around a slave trader who is selling a young girl who was once the daughter of a noble family. The trader explains that her parents were defeated in a political power struggle, and she was exiled, so that's how she ended up here. The people gathered there find it hard to believe that she's really nobility because she doesn't look refined at all, but they do think that she's cute and will grow up to be quite beautiful. Dennis wishes he could do something to help her, but he thinks that he can't save everyone in the world, and if he got angry at every injustice, he would never survive. But when he looks into the girl's lifeless eyes, he's reminded of his own childhood when he was an orphan. The slave trader asks for bids, and they start at 300,000 before others start bidding as well, and it quickly rises to 800,000. Dennis raises the bid to $1 million, and he thinks he will win it, but the shopkeeper he met earlier intervenes with a bid of 1.5 million, claiming that she's quite cute, so he's going to take her home and take good care of her. Dennis notices that this guy looks like a pervert, but he tries not to judge people by their appearance. As he mentioned, he would take care of her. However, the crowd starts talking about how this man is indeed a pervert, and the girl will be miserable if he buys her. Dennis realizes that he can't let this happen at any cost, so he raises his bid even higher. The bidding war continues until it goes way beyond 5 million, and we see that Dennis has actually bought her. He takes her to his new restaurant, but he feels upset since he spent almost all of his savings buying the girl, wanting to help her start fresh. He takes her to a store, buys her a new dress, and she gets cleaned up. Later, we see them walking home together, but the girl is walking pretty slow, so Dennis warns her that she's going to get lost if she doesn't walk closer to him. After a while, his warning proves to be true as she gets lost in the crowd. She can't find Dennis anywhere and gets scared of all the people around her, but after a few minutes, Dennis appears in front of her, not surprised that she actually got lost, and he apologizes for walking too fast. They reach the restaurant, and the girl asks Dennis why he bought her, and he mentions that there was no real reason, except that she reminded him of something from long ago. He asks her name, and she tells him to just call her Slave, but he wonders if she doesn't have a real name. She asks him to call her Exiled, and he introduces himself as Dennis. She asks what she should do, and he tells her that she doesn't need to do anything at all. She can use the upper floor, or if she doesn't want to live there, she can just leave because she's free now. Exiled is shocked to hear it, but before she can say anything else, her stomach growls loudly. Dennis begins preparing something for both of them to eat, and he prepares a wonderful dish that fills the entire restaurant with an amazing aroma. She is enchanted by the delicious smell, and when Dennis finishes cooking, they both sit down to eat. The girl really enjoys the food, and it makes her so happy that she starts crying. Dennis thinks that he doesn't know what she's been through, and he's not going to ask her about it unless she wants to tell him herself. She continues eating, but he notices she is choking on the food, so he quickly helps her. Over the next few days, Exiled helps Dennis decorate the restaurant, and she even takes care of the cleaning, which makes Dennis happy. After a while, they finish preparing everything, and Dennis names his new place the Adventurer's Restaurant. Dennis tells Exiled that she's going to be their poster girl, and she practices her customer service skills before their arrival. On the other hand, Dennis believes he has everything prepared, and he's ready for anything that a customer can throw at them. He states that he's going to make everyone obsessed with his cooking, and they're going to get so addicted that they will eat all 3 meals at his place price every day. He hopes that customers will pay him lots of money because he has no money after spending it all on the restaurant and Exiled. But while he's lost in thought, their first customer enters the restaurant. But to their surprise, the customer is wearing armor. Dennis quickly recalls reading in his restaurant management guide that some adventurers prefer to maintain their privacy, so he decides to respect their boundaries and create a more comfortable atmosphere where they can enjoy their meal in peace. Dennis tells Exiled to serve water to their mysterious guest. While he gives the menu, he wonders what the customer will order because he is prepared to cook anything. However, the customer nervously orders a small portion of rice and crystal umeboshi. He wonders if this customer is a light eater, but the customer shakes his head. Dennis realizes they must be short on budget, so that's why he is ordering the cheapest items available. Dennis feels sympathy and asks if he likes spicy pork, which the customer confirms, so Dennis decides to prepare that instead. However, the knight protests, mentioning that they don't have enough money to pay for such an expensive dish. Dennis firmly states that he can't serve an ordinary meal to the first customer in his restaurant, but then he suddenly realizes, from her voice, that the knight is actually a woman. His suspicion is confirmed when the knight removes her helmet, revealing the face of a young woman who introduces herself as Henrietta. She explains her difficult situation, that she was recently kicked out of her adventuring party because they believe females are weak and they only cause problems for the group. She expresses her frustration with this prejudice, and Dennis completely agrees with her. Henrietta mentions that she is just level 23. However, Dennis finds it impressive, and he believes that at her level, she's definitely qualified to be an adventurer. Henrietta then asks if he has heard about the vice captain of the strongest party in the kingdom, the Silver Wing, who is a woman, and she is even considered a legendary swordsman. Dennis says he has heard about her, but he finds her troublesome. Henrietta explains that she hasn't been able to find any parties willing to accept her without hiding her true identity, and this ongoing struggle has used up all her savings. After a few minutes, Dennis serves her the meal he prepared, telling her that she will feel much better after eating something. Henrietta hesitates, asking if he's sure about feeding her since she can't pay for it. But Dennis tells her that she can pay once she has the money. Henrietta takes the first bite, and she's amazed by the incredible flavor because she has never eaten anything this delicious in her entire life. She finishes the entire bowl within minutes, praising Dennis for his exceptional cooking skills. Dennis hopes that she becomes a regular customer of his restaurant, so she promises that she will, but only after she manages to join a party and earn some money. Dennis wonders if he should ask his other customers if they know of any parties that might need a female swordsman, and Henrietta is thrilled by the suggestion. Dennis points out that it will be difficult for him to contact her if an opportunity comes up, so he hopes that she will keep dropping by the restaurant from time to time, which she agrees to. A few days later, we see a group of male adventurers eating at the restaurant, and they are thoroughly impressed by the quality of the food. They also compliment Exiled, praising Dennis for having such a helpful assistant. They consider this meal a good luck charm before they head into the dungeon for their next quest, so Dennis realizes they are an adventuring party. He asks them if they are looking for a swordsman, since he knows of a skilled female warrior. They don't mind the gender at all, and they hope that she can start working with them soon. Dennis is surprised to find a suitable party for Henrietta so quickly, and they explain that their party was just lacking in firepower, so this recommendation is like a godsend to them. Later that day, Dennis informs Henrietta about the party he found for her, and she immediately agrees to join them, which shocks him as he believes she should be more careful before joining strangers, but she assures him that everything is going to be fine. Dennis decides to let her make the final decision and serves her meal. Henrietta thanks him warmly before digging in. She says she'll have to earn a lot of money so she can pay him back properly, but Dennis reminds her not to talk with her mouth full. Henrietta then wonders what she should eat when she comes back tomorrow, and he finds it amusing that she really plans to have all her meals at his restaurant. After finishing her food, she leaves with a big smile on her face, hoping to finally earn some money. After that, Dennis continues to serve customers throughout the day, and he feels happy with the steady flow of business. At night, two girls arrive at the restaurant, and he thinks these will be the final customers for the day. He overhears them praising the restaurant, but then one of them mentions recent rumors of a dangerous party that has been recruiting solo female adventurers, only to take deep into the dungeons before assaulting them. The criminals are careful to move to different towns after committing their crimes once or twice, place, which makes it difficult for authorities to catch them. Dennis finds the news alarming and begins to worry it might be the same group he recommended to Henrietta, which makes him fear for her safety. The following day, Henrietta finally meets her new party, and she introduces herself. The leader of the group introduces himself as Still, a light swordsman, and the other members also share their names and their skills. Still tells her that there's no need for her to be overly formal with this party, as they prefer a relaxed atmosphere. They head out together, and while following them, Henrietta asks what kind of quest they will be fulfilling that day. Still explains that it's just a simple gathering quest, and they will venture into the dungeon to collect some items. Henrietta asks what exactly they will be gathering, but Still mentions that they will discuss the details once they reach the dungeon. She thinks she would have preferred to know the details, but she doesn't want to make things awkward or seem overly demanding on her first day, so she just follows their lead. They soon enter the dungeon, and Henrietta immediately proves her worth by defeating several monsters that come in their path. Her party members praise her skills, saying that it's a big help having a strong swordsman like her on the team. Henrietta feels genuinely happy to be relied upon like this, thinking that this is the first time she's experienced such acceptance and appreciation. The party decides to venture even deeper into the dungeon, and Henrietta remains optimistic, thinking that things might go well with this party. They encounter more monsters as they advance, and she handles all the fighting while her party members simply watch and offer encouraging words. She defeats every creature that comes their way, but the constant battles begin to take a toll on her stamina, and she starts feeling exhausted. Instead of suggesting a break, her party members tell her that their destination is just a little ahead. Despite barely being able to walk properly, she follows them deeper into the dungeon. They finally arrive at their destination, and Still explains that the memory crystals found in this area are what they were after. Henrietta, completely drained from the journey, collapses from exhaustion, so Still orders the party's healer, Marmok, to cast recovery magic on her, and the healer approaches her, so Henrietta thanks him in advance. However, instead of healing her, he casts a paralysis spell, leaving her unable to move. Henrietta realizes that something is wrong, and she tries to reach for her sword, but Still steps on her hand, preventing her from defending herself. Still then states that luckily for them, she's such an idiot that they only had to flatter her a bit to get her to let her guard down completely. The healer adds that Still shouldn't call her an idiot since they're going to create some good memories because of her. Still thinks that female swordsmen are the ideal targets because they're not as smart as sages and wizards, but they are quite attractive. Henrietta realizes she can't stay like this, and she knows she needs to do something, but her paralyzed body refuses to respond to her commands. Still tells her that they will set her free once she entertains them for an hour, but before leaving, they will stun her again, so it's up to luck whether someone rescues her or she dies in the dungeon. Henrietta recalls Dennis's words about being cautious while choosing a party, and she thinks that if she had been alert from the beginning, she would have noticed the red flags. Henrietta desperately cries for help, asking someone to save her, but the criminals hold her down and tell her that no one is going to come to her rescue in the dungeon. After that, they begin removing her clothes while praising her body, but before they can do the unthinkable, they hear a strange noise echoing through the dungeon. They wonder if it might be another party, as that will complicate things. Still orders one of his men to investigate the source of the sound, but before they can check it, the guy gets flown to the dungeon wall with a strong attack. They soon notice what appears to be some kind of monster standing before them, but it's actually a man wearing a paper mask. Still orders Marmok to cast a search spell to find the intruder's weakness, but when he tries to appraise the attacker, the spell fails completely. Marmok realizes that there is an enormous level gap between them and this mysterious figure, meaning they have no chance against it. Still thinks that they haven't gone that deep inside the dungeon, so a monster of such incredible power couldn't possibly exist on the upper floors of the dungeon. But before he can process this information further, the masked man flips his blades to the blunt side and attacks him directly, taking him out with a single devastating blow. The remaining party members try to flee in terror, but the masked man pursues them relentlessly, taking them down one by one with precision strikes. Henrietta watches in amazement, wondering who this person could be, and she notices that his movements are just like a highly skilled chef handling kitchen knives, but she is so exhausted that she loses consciousness. The next day, Henrietta arrives in Dennis's restaurant, and she explains everything that happened to her. Henrietta mentions that when she regained consciousness, she found herself lying safely in the Adventurers Guild. She wasn't able to thank the mysterious man who saved her, and the party members who harassed her were found knocked unconscious and tied up with rope outside the dungeon. The guild investigated the incident, and they discovered that the group was actually a notorious notorious criminal party, and they were all wanted for different crimes. Henrietta reflects that the entire experience feels like it was all a dream, and she acknowledges that this incident has taught her the importance of being careful while choosing a party. Dennis takes some of the blame, because he believes it's also his fault since he recommended the party to her without doing proper research on their background. Henrietta doesn't blame him at all, and she appreciates his concern for her well-being. But her stomach starts growling from hunger, so Dennis asks her what she would like to eat. She mentions that she still doesn't have any money, but Dennis tells her that she can have whatever she likes from the menu. Feeling bold, she orders the most expensive steak available, which leaves Dennis surprised, so she feels guilty and asks him to make the cheapest food. Dennis tells her that she can't retract an order once she has placed it, and he also invites Aitlier to join her for dinner. Suddenly, the two girls from earlier arrive at the restaurant, and Dennis asks them to serve themselves water since Aitlier is currently having her dinner. They understand and comply with the request while Dennis begins preparing the expensive steak that Henrietta had ordered. After he finishes cooking, he serves the perfectly prepared steak to both Henrietta and Aitlier, and they both express their delight as it tastes amazing. The two girls then ask Dennis why he didn't open the restaurant yesterday, mentioning that it's not good for regular customers like them if he closes the shop 2 days in a row without notice. Dennis explains that he simply had something important to take care of, and Henrietta finds this timing rather suspicious. She takes a closer look at him, studying his build and movements more carefully. She suddenly realizes that he is the same person who saved her in the dungeon. But before she can say anything or confront him about it, another customer enters the restaurant, interrupting the moment, and Dennis welcomes him to the restaurant. Some time later, at the restaurant, Henrietta is talking to Dennis, but she feels like he's not really listening, which annoys her. Dennis then asks what she wants to order, so she requests the sorcery ramen. While cooking, he suddenly brings up her earlier concern, whether she should hide her gender while adventuring. Henrietta is surprised that he was actually paying attention. Dennis tells her she should do whatever feels right, because in the end, she's just being herself, and that's what makes her special. Dennis serves her the food, but his words seem to leave a deep impact on her. Without saying much, she gets up and walks into the other room, surprising everyone. There, she reflects on how people who make mistakes often become so afraid of messing up again that they lose sight of who they really are. But instead of hiding behind fear, she realizes it's better to be true to herself. Henrietta soon returns in her usual clothes, and Aitlier compliments her outfit. Henrietta sits back at her table and starts enjoying her delicious meal. She tells Dennis that his words really resonated with her, and she believes advice from a skilled chef carries a special kind of weight. Dennis is happy to hear that, but he asks Henrietta if she's truly serious about finding a new party after all. She's been eating all her meals at his restaurant and still hasn't made her first payment. Henrietta nervously admits that she's been trying to find a party, but hasn't had any luck so far. She's also surprised that he's been keeping track of all her bills. She thought she didn't have to pay for them. However, Dennis reminds her that only the first meal was free, and she'll need to pay for the rest. Aitlier also feels that Dennis is being a bit mean, but just then, they're interrupted by the sudden arrival of a customer. The customer takes a seat and starts looking at the menu, while Dennis tries to figure out whether it's a boy or a girl. When Dennis asks if they're ready to order, the customer replies by asking what's good. Dennis confidently says that everything is excellent. The young boy then points out that this doesn't really help, since it's only natural for Dennis to like his own food. Dennis suggests a dish named Vitara Katsuden, but the customer isn't in the mood for a rice bowl. Henrietta also joins the conversation, recommending the pasta since she personally finds it very delicious, but he doesn't want something heavy. She then suggests another dish, but he's not in the mood for that either, which frustrates Dennis as his patience runs out. Henrietta quickly stops Dennis, saying that he is just a teenager and they tend to struggle with decisions. Aitlier approaches the boy and suggests he should get fried rice, and seeing her cuteness, the boy can't ignore her, so he decides to give it a try. Dennis quickly prepares the dish using his level 99 skills. As the customer takes his first bite, his expression makes it clear how much he's enjoying it. Dennis watches him closely and, while he's eating, asks if something's wrong. The boy looks confused, so Dennis explains that he noticed him sighing earlier and thought he might want someone to talk to. The boy says there's nothing in particular he wants to discuss, and Dennis respects that, saying it's fine if he doesn't want to share. But then, the boy suddenly begins to open up about his problem. He says his problem is that everyone around him is too weak, which shocks them. This boy clearly has no filter. Dennis just pretends to agree, but the boy asks if he wants to hear more. Even though Dennis isn't really interested, the boy keeps going, saying that the people around him them all have limited mindset. All they care about is completing whatever quest is in front of them and making some money, with no ambition to improve or become a top-tier party. Dennis looks at Henrietta and thinks that she can't even earn money, let alone have such high ambitions as the boy, but she feels he is just being rude. The boy declares that he refuses to associate with unmotivated party members because he believes that adventuring isn't about going to safe areas and fighting weak monsters. For him, it's about exploring the unknown. But when he shared this philosophy with his previous party, they kicked him out. Dennis wonders if his restaurant is somehow emitting pheromones that attract outcasts. The boy continues explaining his ideas that he's not interested in staying with people who have small mindsets, because one day he's going to become a member of the Silver Wing Party as the strongest wizard. Dennis advises him to be careful not to get so worked up that he ends up alone after all. Adventurers are only adventurers because of their parties. The boy replies that he'll consider joining a party, but only if they can keep up with him. He pays for his meal, telling Dennis to keep the change, but Dennis notices he paid the exact amount for the order. As he leaves, he introduces himself as Vivia Strange and says he'll be back soon to try the shrimp fried rice next time. A few days later, Vivia returns to the restaurant and waits for his order to be prepared. He announces that he's found a new party, and they are the strongest party in the area called the Night Mist. Dennis congratulates him, and Vivia confidently says that someone like him is always in demand by top-tier parties. Dennis asks about their levels, since Vivia was so insistent on only working with strong party members, but Vivia replies that levels can come later as long as someone is motivated enough to improve. He claims he has many advanced skills that just need to be put into practice, and he believes the party chose him because of his future potential. Dennis is happy for him, and Vivia adds that at this rate, he's going to join the Silver Wing very soon. Dennis serves him the shrimp fried rice, and as Vivia eats, he wonders if he'll get a cool nickname once he joins the Silver Wing. Dennis recalls that he used to have the nickname Legendary Fried Rice. He thinks Vivia is a bit too self-absorbed, but admits that wanting to grow isn't a bad thing. He believes the boy has the potential to become a great adventurer if he can find a party that trains him properly. Dennis asks about his first job, and Vivia explains that it's tomorrow. They'll be heading to the 5th floor of the dungeon to collect rare minerals. Dennis uses his appraisal ability to check Vivia's level and sees that he's only level 17, which is impressive for his age, but he knows the 5th floor usually requires adventurers to be above level 30. Concerned for Vivia's safety, Dennis politely asks if that isn't a bit too deep for him, but Vivia confidently replies that he'll be fine. His party's elite members have promised to give him their full support. Dennis thinks that while Vivia claims to have advanced skills, he probably just read about them in books, thinking he can already use them. He explains that a person's level is the quantification of the number and quality of skills they have acquired. Dennis further adds that base stats increase with each level because the skills become more accurate and are almost always active. He thinks that if Vivia really has acquired multiple advanced skills, it's odd that his level hasn't increased accordingly. Vivia feels that his party believes in his abilities, but Dennis still advises him to be careful. Vivia doesn't take him seriously, saying Dennis probably doesn't know anything about dungeons anyway, since he clearly hasn't been in one before. Dennis remembers that the last time he went into a dungeon, it was all the way down to the 37th floor. He thinks Vivia will be fine if he's really going with a top-tier party. As Vivia leaves, he says he'll try the crab fried rice next time. The next day, Dennis and Aetlier are out shopping, and Dennis thinks that by now, Vivia must have reached the 5th floor. He wonders if he should have stopped him, and Aetlier hopes Vivia is safe. Suddenly, they overhear a group of passing adventurers talking about Vivia and whether he'll be okay. One of them says it's too late to worry now, but admits it was pretty cruel of their boss to send Vivia down to the 5th floor just to see if he could make it back on his own. Another suggests it's just their way of testing whether new recruits are worthy of joining them. Hearing this, Dennis immediately grabs them and pulls them aside, saying he wants to talk. They ask if he realizes they're members of the Night Mist party, then charge at him, but Dennis easily takes them down. Afterward, he tells Aetlier they'll need to close the restaurant for the day. She understands that he's going after Vivia, so she simply asks him to be careful. Meanwhile, Vivia is running from goblins inside the dungeon. He remembers how his party members abandoned him, telling him to find his own way back. As he blindly rushes out of the dungeon, he suddenly gets caught by vines. He tries to free himself, but he realizes they are bound by a spell, so he will need to use the spell-breaking magic. However, as he tries to use the magic, his mind goes blank as he has never practiced those spells he read from the books. He thought he had memorized everything, but now he's terrified that the goblins will find him and stab him to death. Just then, he senses someone approaching and a girl suddenly appears and helps him hide in a nearby cavern. Vivia thanks her for saving him and says it's because she taught him the steps for breaking the spell that he managed to survive. He's impressed that she knows such ancient magic and admits he wouldn't be alive if she hadn't been there. The girl tells Vivia it's too soon to feel safe because they need to find a way to escape first. He introduces himself as Vivia and asks for her name, so she says her name is Cynthia. He wonders if she got lost and ended up here. Cynthia explains that her party left her behind after she got caught in the same trap as him. Vivia thinks that was horrible of them, but she says it's alright, since she was never good at anything she tried, and she was nothing but trouble for them. Cynthia apologizes as she thinks he might feel attacked. Cynthia suggests they wait and see if his party comes back to rescue them. Vivia tells her that he's in the same situation as her because no one is going to rescue him. He accepts that he was too self-absorbed and he never cared for others, so he got into fights with his party members. Vivia believes he has a terrible personality, but Cynthia insists that's not true. He reminds her that she doesn't know anything about him, and she replies that he doesn't know anything about her either. This makes Vivia realize he's never talked to a stranger like this, and it's made him feel a little better. Cynthia is glad to hear this, but unfortunately, the goblins return, searching everywhere for Vivia. He realizes they don't have many options, so he decides to act as a decoy and draw off all the goblins so she can escape. Cynthia refuses, saying there's no point if he doesn't survive, but Vivia tells her that he would be dead already if she hadn't saved him. He mentions this is the first time he's felt this way, since he has always lived selfishly. Vivia tells her to run while he draws the goblin's attention, and as he takes off, she tries to grab him, but can't stop him in time. He jumps in front of the goblins, thinking he's okay with dying as long as Cynthia gets to live. He uses a palm spell to hold the goblins back, but they easily break through it and charge in to finish him off. Suddenly, Dennis arrives and uses his skills to create a large barrier of rocks to shield them. Seeing his face covered by a paper bag, Vivia thinks he's some kind of monster and panics, so Dennis tries to calm him down. Vivia eventually recognizes his voice, and Dennis removes the mask, saying it's pointless to keep it on now. He scolds Vivia for recklessly jumping in front of the goblins and says they need to get out of there quickly, but Vivia insists they have to save the girl. He wonders if she might have escaped already, but Dennis says he didn't see anyone on his way in, but Vivia thinks she might still be in the cavern. Dennis goes to check, but all he finds is Cynthia's skeleton, leaving Vivia in shock. A little while later, they ask about her at the guild and learn that she was a 16-year-old wizard who got separated from her party on the 5th floor 13 years ago. Later, Dennis and Vivia put her remains to rest and made a grave for her. Dennis mentions he's heard that sometimes the spirits of adventurers who die in dungeons end up saving those still alive. Vivia tells Cynthia that he'll visit her again and promises to become a powerful wizard, so he can save girls like her in the future. As they leave, Dennis tries to improve the mood, and he offers to make some fried rice. He invites Vivia to join him, and Vivia gladly accepts. Dennis asks him not to be so down, saying Cynthia won't be able to rest in peace like this. Vivia asks to at least let him be sad for a while, but he suddenly senses Cynthia's spirit saying goodbye to him, and he thinks she was a true wizard who lived even after her death. The previous day, where a man calls out to Bashal, demanding to know when she'll finally fix the report she was supposed to submit. She doesn't have an answer, so she lowers her head and apologizes, but that's not enough for him. He says all she ever does is apologize. The others start laughing when she even apologizes for that. Bashal tries to explain that the mission reward numbers don't add up, but her boss hits her on the head with the stack of papers and tells her to redo everything until it matches. He even questions whether she's really level 32. Because of all that, Bashal ends up working late into the night while everyone else has already gone home. As she goes over the documents, she realizes the numbers are completely off, which explains why the calculations didn't match. It hits her that her senior is the one making these careless mistakes, but she's the one stuck fixing them. On top of that, she has to wake up at 3 a.m. for another mission and hasn't eaten all day, so the hunger is starting to feel unbearable. She doubts any restaurants are still open at this hour, but her hunger is so intense that she decides to take a chance and see if the new place that just opened in town is still serving customers. When Bashal finally arrives, she sees Aitlier closing up, which breaks her heart. But Aitlier notices her distress and invites her in. Dennis is surprised to see a customer after closing, but with some help from Henrietta and Vivia, Aitlier convinces him to cook one last meal for her. Dennis finally agrees, and after looking at the menu, Bashal orders the daily special. Meanwhile, Vivia chats chats with Henrietta about cutting her hair. Bashel notices how happy they all seem together and assumes they must be regulars at the restaurant. She reflects on how she rarely gets any sleep and doesn't have any friends. But seeing their happiness makes her think she should start by visiting nice places like this one. After a while, Dennis brings out her food, and as Bashel takes the first bite, she's amazed by how delicious it is. She instantly falls in love with the new restaurant, and as she excitedly praises the meal, Henrietta jumps in with several suggestions on what she should try next. Vivia jokes that Henrietta has already tried everything on the menu, and Henrietta proudly introduces herself as the restaurant's first customer. Dennis quickly corrects her, saying she can't be called a customer if she's never paid for anything. He tells her to get a job, but Henrietta points out that Vivia is also unemployed. Dennis replies that even if Vivia doesn't work, at least he pays for his meals. Vivia mentions he has some savings, and Henrietta jokingly calls him a traitor. Hearing their friendly argument, Bashel bursts out laughing. Dennis apologizes for the commotion, but suddenly they notice she started to cry, leaving everyone surprised. Bashel reflects on how much joy there is in life, yet she can't understand why her own life feels so boring and difficult. She's constantly stuck at work, never recognized for her efforts, and every morning she wakes up feeling like she doesn't want to go on. In a flashback, when she was younger, people saw Bashel as a promising mage. Her entire village believed in her potential and pooled their resources to support her studies in the big city, hoping she'd become a famous mage. Things started off well. She skipped grades and eventually graduated. Afterward, the headmistress offered her a job as a teacher at the school. Bashel had advanced ahead because of her remarkable abilities, and she was even offered a position as a faculty member. However, she declined the offer because she wanted to become an adventurer and earn lots of money so she could support her family back in the village. Bashel soon leaves the restaurant, and they all feel deeply sad for her situation. Vivia reveals that she is part of the Night Mist, the same party that left him for dead in the dungeon. He mentions that he only saw her once, but she left a strong impression on his mind. The others quickly urge Dennis to do something, but he refuses, saying he's just a cook and all he can do is feed people. He believes the only person who can truly help Bashel is herself. The next day at 3 a.m., her alarm goes off, but she's so exhausted that she doesn't want to get up. Half asleep, she turns it off and goes back to sleep. A few hours later, she finally wakes up and realizes she's late. She quickly grabs her things and rushes out to meet her party members, who are furious at her for being so irresponsible. They soon head out for their morning dungeon mission, but after a while, they encounter a werewolf that knocks one of the party members to the ground. Bashel reacts instantly and saves him with her wind magic, but when she goes to check on him, he angrily pushes her away. After the mission, Bashel feels deeply dejected. As she wanders through the town streets, she recalls how her teammates didn't appreciate her help. They claimed it had been their plan to lure out more monsters, and accused her of interfering. They said cruel things, telling her they'd all be better off if she weren't around. Henrietta and Vivia happen to be walking down the street, chatting about food, when they suddenly notice Bashel looking visibly depressed. Concerned, they decide to follow her and soon arrive at a tower. They see Bashel standing at the edge and realize the situation is serious. Just as Bashel jumps, Henrietta leaps after her and grabs hold of her. Vivia quickly uses his magic spell, Palm, to create a giant cushion that ensures they land safely landing. Meanwhile, back at the restaurant, Aitlier steps out of the bath, complaining that there's no towel. Dennis notices she's completely naked and dripping water all over the floor, which makes him very uncomfortable. He tells Aitlier to put on her dress, but she refuses, saying she won't wear it without drying off first. Just then, Vivia and the others arrive, and the moment Vivia sees Aitlier like that, he quickly covers his eyes. Dennis is surprised to see them carrying an unconscious Bashel and quickly brings her inside. He believes she's suffering from severe mental distress, explaining that when a sensitive person keeps everything bottled up, it eventually builds to the point where it becomes unbearable, and they try to destroy themselves. Vivia can't help but joke that Henrietta would never suffer from something like that, since she's so spontaneous and never takes things too seriously. Dennis is glad to see they're already getting along, and Henrietta asks how they can help Bashel. Dennis explains that the only real remedy is plenty of rest. Vivia doubts that will ever happen, given that Bashel is part of the Night Mist, so Dennis promises to have a talk with her party. That night, Dennis welcomes the members of the Night Mist into his restaurant. Their leader, Captain Hopper, apologizes for the trouble caused by one of his party members. Dennis also offers an apology, mentioning that he had to knock out 2 of their members the other day out of concern for Vivia. Hopper brushes it off, saying he's heard the food here is supposed to be exceptional. Dennis quickly realizes this man isn't going to back down easily, and by using his appraisal skill, Still, he sees that Hopper is actually level 51, which is above average for an adventurer. Dennis explains that Bashel is safe and resting for now, but she's in no condition to continue working with their party. He suggests they release her so she can recover properly. However, Hopper refuses, saying she signed a contract with them. He then pulls out Bashel's contract and shows it to Dennis. As Dennis examines the contract, he grows angry. It's clear they've placed the entire group's burden on Bashel's shoulders. He realizes they're trying to squeeze every bit of usefulness out of her, which he finds inhumane. But Hopper seems unfazed by the criticism. Dennis loses his composure and tells them outright that they're nothing but a gang of cruel con artists. This enrages Hopper, who crushes the mug in his hand. He tells Dennis that they're the strongest party in town, so this is essentially their territory, and they make the rules. Meanwhile, Bashel wakes up feeling miserable, wondering why they didn't just let her die. She thinks everything would be better if she were gone. Aetlier tells her that she once wanted to do the same, after being banished and sold into slavery. But everything changed when Dennis brought her to the restaurant and gave her hope. She believes there's still happiness waiting for Bashel and suggests she eat something delicious. If Bashel still wants to die after that, then maybe there's nothing more anyone can do. Either way, Aetlier says she'll respect her choice, but she hopes Bashel chooses to live. Outside the room, Dennis asks Hopper if he thinks he's some kind of king, to which Hopper casually shrugs and says it's pretty much like that. He explains that in every dungeon city, the strongest party holds the real power since no one else can compete with them. He mentions Silverwing as a perfect example, but Dennis quickly points out that Hopper's party is nothing like them. Hopper disagrees, saying it's basically the same thing, except that instead of serving royalty and nobles, the Night Mist's influence is limited to this small town. He adds that Dennis has a nice little place, but if he burns it down, no one would stop him. Dennis then wonders if Hopper is threatening him. Just as things are about to get messy, Katie arrives, thrilled to see Dennis after so long. She excitedly compliments his new restaurant. Dennis tries to get her to come back later, as he's in the middle of something important, but Katie refuses. She came all the way from the capital and isn't about to leave. Hopper can't help but notice the crimson armor, the twin red swords, her fiery hair, and most importantly, the insignia on her coat. He realizes she's the vice captain of Silver Wing and wonders what her relationship with Dennis is, since they seem quite close. After Dennis convinces Katie to take a seat and wait for him at the counter, he asks Hopper if there's a way to remove Bashel from their party, as he doesn't want to fight them. Katie immediately interrupts again, tightly hugging Vivia because she thinks he's a very cute girl, but Dennis quickly tells her that Vivia is actually a boy. Vivia then asks if she's really the vice captain of Silver Wing, and Katie confirms it. When they ask about her relationship with Dennis, Katie reveals that he used to be part of Silver Wing and that they were basically partners, shocking everyone in the restaurant. Hopper's eyes widen as he realizes it's unwise to make an enemy of the Silver Wing party. His subordinate asks what they should do, so Hopper hands him the contract and tells him to burn it immediately. He then officially releases Bashel from the party and quickly storms out of the place, wishing her a speedy recovery. Katie thinks Hopper seemed pretty hostile and can't believe he was bothering her Dennis, so she wants to go after him and fight, but Dennis stops her and says it's not a good idea. Katie asks if she should kick Hopper out of the country, and Dennis admits she probably could, but tells Katie not to be so hot-headed. Katie grumbles that Dennis can be a real pain sometimes, but she kind of likes that about him. Dennis changes the subject and asks Katie what she wants to eat, but just then, Aetlier arrives with Bashel, saying their new friend wants to try today's special. Katie decides to order the same, and Dennis quickly gets to work preparing a delicious meal for them. Dennis soon finishes cooking and serves their food. Katie eagerly digs in, excited to taste her old friend's cooking after so long. Bashel notices how confidently Katie is eating, and Dennis encourages her to start as well before the food gets cold. She takes a bite and thanks him for once again making such a delicious meal. After the two of them finish their meals, everyone looks at them, sharing the same admiration for Dennis's exceptional cooking. After returning from Dennis's restaurant, Katie heads back to the Silver Wing headquarters. There, she notices her teammates talking about Vigo and how they haven't made much progress on their recent missions. As she takes it all in, she accidentally bumps into Vigo. He dismisses the others and asks Katie about her recent visit to Dennis, having heard about it from one of his sources. Katie explains that she had missed his cooking, so she decided to visit him. She recalls how happy she felt while enjoying the food, so much so that she even invited him to return to Silver Wing, since the group was struggling without their star chef. However, Dennis turned down the offer, saying he was just a cook and had no interest in going back to the adventurer lifestyle. Katie asks Vigo ego to convince Dennis to come back to the team, but he refuses and tells her to stay away from Dennis entirely. Meanwhile, Dennis's restaurant is packed with customers, as everyone has fallen in love with his cooking, which makes them return again and again. As Dennis prepares the dishes, Aetlier serves the food and takes orders. Vivia and Henrietta are also delighted to see their favorite restaurant becoming so popular, and they both think Dennis truly deserves this success. Bashel brings water to Vivia, surprising him. She warmly thanks him for visiting her when she was unwell and mentions that she's now working at the restaurant too. Bashel explains that, like Aetlier, she also lives there now. Vivia is glad to see her doing well, but gently reminds her not to overwork herself. However, Bashel feels that she can't sit idle, so keeping herself busy seems like the best approach. Bashel also mentions that Aetlier's company makes it very easy for her to learn new things, and despite being younger, Aetlier is her senior at work. Dennis observes them working together and thinks they make a wonderful team. Dennis personally serves Vivia and Henrietta their meals, and as soon as they take the first bite, Henrietta begins praising the food enthusiastically. She finally understands why the restaurant has become so busy lately. She feels proud to be considered a regular customer. However, Dennis quickly corrects her, mentioning that she's not exactly a regular but a freeloader. Bashel and Vivia are shocked to learn that Henrietta hasn't paid Dennis anything yet. She explains that earning money isn't exactly easy for someone like her. Dennis understands, but warns her that if this continues much longer, it won't end well for her, visibly scaring Henrietta. To lighten the mood, Vivia changes the subject and asks if it's hard to serve so many customers at once. Dennis takes the chance to praise Aetlier for her flawless serving skills and for keeping everything running smoothly. Vivia notices that she seems especially happy lately, and Bashel wonders if something special has happened. Suddenly, Dennis freezes mid-conversation and accidentally drops a bowl on the floor. He quickly tells Vivia to visit the restaurant on his next day off. Meanwhile, Henrietta tries to prove her usefulness by offering to help, but Dennis completely ignores her. Henrietta feels down and starts overthinking everything. Lately, nothing seems to be going her way. She doesn't even have enough money to stay at an inn with hot water, and it's been a while since she last visited the public bathhouse. She knows she desperately needs to pay Dennis back, but suddenly starts wondering if Dennis and Vivia have been talking about her behind her back. She fears Dennis might even be thinking about banning her from the restaurant permanently. A few days later, Vivia finally finds time to visit Dennis during his break. Dennis confides in him that Aetlier might have a boyfriend. He explains that he's been giving her a weekly allowance, and he suspects she's been spending it on him. Vivia suggests that instead of worrying and speculating, Dennis should just ask Aetlier directly, but Dennis admits he doesn't have the courage to ask such a personal question, since he has no experience in that area. He adds that if she really does have a boyfriend, the guy should at least come meet him and bring a respectful gift. Dennis also declares he won't accept anyone below level 80 as Aetlier's boyfriend. Vivia thinks he's being way too overprotective, especially since she's not even his real daughter. Aetlier overhears their loud conversation from the other room and wonders what they're talking about. Vivia quickly takes control of the situation and lies, saying he was asking Dennis to teach him how to cook. Dennis gives him a thumbs up for the quick save, but Aetlier also chimes in, saying she'd like to learn cooking too. Dennis brings them both into the kitchen and starts teaching them how to make katsudon. He explains that the way you slice the onions can really affect the flavor of the dish. Their eyes start stinging from the sharp onion fumes, but Dennis only pays attention to Aetlier, completely ignoring Vivia, who starts to feel left out. As he helps Aetlier with her technique, Dennis fondly remembers how his mother taught him to cook years ago, and how she really insisted that he should learn cooking without relying on his magical skills. Aetlier accidentally drops pieces of eggshell into the bowl, so Dennis gently shows her how to crack an egg properly. He continues teaching her patiently, while completely brushing off Vivia, telling him to just keep going without even looking his way whenever he asks a question. After working for a while, they finally finish the dish. As they're placing it into serving bowls, they hear the town bell ringing in the distance. Suddenly, Aetlier gets up and rushes out, saying she has somewhere important to be, leaving both Dennis and Vivia confused. Bashel arrives at that moment, so Dennis asks her to eat the food they prepared and also gives her a list of essential supplies to buy for the restaurant. However, she points out that it might be too much for her to carry on her own. Luckily, Henrietta shows up just then, and Dennis tells her to go with Bashel and help with the shopping. Henrietta happily agrees, thinking this might be her chance to finally prove her usefulness. Dennis rushes out with Vivia, telling the girls to enjoy the food. Sometime later, they spot Aetlier in the busy market, engaged in an animated conversation with an elderly woman. Vivia feels uneasy and says they shouldn't be spying on Aetlier like this, but Dennis tells him to stay quiet. He sees himself as her guardian and believes it's his responsibility to look after her. Once again, Vivia asks why Dennis doesn't just talk to her directly about his concerns. Dennis admits he just can't bring himself to do it. At this point, Vivia thinks Dennis is basically acting like a stalker. Dennis ignores Vivia's criticism, and when he sees Aetlier talking to a boy, he starts boiling with anger. Vivia suggests they might just be friends, but then they notice the boy leading her toward a jewelry store, making Dennis even more furious. He thinks she's far too young for marriage, and he convinced the boy is buying her a wedding ring. As the store door closes, Dennis grows more anxious, so Vivia comes up with a plan to help them spy more effectively. Meanwhile, while the girls are out shopping, Bashel notices that Henrietta looks sad and asks if she's okay. Henrietta explains that she's worried because she hasn't been able to pay off any of her debt to Dennis. Bashel is surprised, since she knows Henrietta goes on adventures sometimes and should be able to pay at least a portion of what she owes. Henrietta explains that, aside from the high cost of maintaining her equipment, like her armor, she constantly gets injured and ends up spending all her money on healing potions just to recover. It's extremely hard for her to get by on her limited income, and she feels like the more she works, the less money she actually has. Henrietta wants to find a way to repay Dennis for everything he's done for her, but she has no idea how she'll ever manage it. Her sincere resolve to pay him back impresses Bashel, who believes that true feelings are the most important thing. They suddenly overhear some people talking about how the captain of the Night Mist party was badly humiliated by Dennis, and there are rumors that Dennis might be a former member of Silver Wing. The people hope the Night Mist group won't try to get revenge on the chef, which deeply worries both girls as they look at each other with real concern for Dennis's safety. Meanwhile, Vivia returns with a megaphone from a nearby store, but Dennis is completely unable to understand why they would need such a thing. Vivia reveals that it's actually a magical item typically used for speeches and theatrical plays. The wind magic attached to it allows the sound to travel incredible distances. Dennis still fails to understand how this will help their current situation, since they don't want to speak loudly. Vivia mentions that they can use it in reverse. He applies his palm magic and places it against the wall in reverse, so they can clearly hear sounds from inside the store. They soon pick up Aetlier's voice from within, but they become deeply concerned when she says something is beautiful and that she will treasure it for the rest of her life. Dennis completely loses his composure after hearing Aetlier say something so romantic, but just then, a thief snatches a woman's purse and runs right past them. Dennis quickly grasps the situation and tells Vivia to hold on tight because they're going to pursue this thief. The thief feels confident about getting away, knowing the old woman had a lot of money and thinking no one can catch him since he's level 30. But his confidence quickly fades when Dennis starts closing the distance. Without using any kind of magic enhancement, Vivia is amazed by Dennis's incredible natural speed and wonders if all Silver Wing members are this fast. Dennis simply says he's just physically gifted. The thief decides to use his wind magic to leap over rooftops, desperately trying to lose Dennis off his back. But Dennis simply decides to get serious about the chase and asks Vivia if they can use some magic to help them keep up. Vivia casts the palm spell, and Dennis uses it to launch himself high enough to reach the rooftops, allowing them to continue pursuing the thief. Vivia keeps casting palm spells to help them keep up with the thief's impressive speed. Just as they're about to catch him, the man uses advanced wind magic to slip away, leaving them both frustrated. From a distance, the thief mocks Dennis, which makes him absolutely furious, determined to catch him no matter what. Dennis tells Vivia to make sure they land safely as they prepare for a huge leap through the air. They suddenly spot Henrietta and Bashel on the street below, right as the thief runs past them. Dennis shouts for them to stop him. Just when the thief thinks he's finally escaped, Henrietta lands a direct hit, stopping him cold. Everyone is impressed, including Dennis, who feels proud of her quick thinking and decisive action. Henrietta is overjoyed to hear his praise, especially since she had been worried he was upset with her earlier. She adds that she truly wanted to find a way to repay his kindness. After everything is settled, Dennis and the girls return to the restaurant, where he tells them he suspects that Aetlier has found herself a boyfriend. Bashel mentions that Henrietta was really worried he might ban her from the restaurant, but Dennis reassures them that he'd never kick out someone who appreciates his cooking as much as she does. However, he adds that this policy only applies for now. He might not feel the same way if she keeps freeloading forever. After a while, Aetlier finally returns to the restaurant, and they all fall completely silent, since they were just gossiping about her private life moments earlier. She walks straight to Dennis and hands him a box, saying it's a present for him. When Dennis opens it, he finds a bracelet inside. Aitlier explains that she's been saving her allowance for weeks and had it specially made at a jewelry store. She adds that she chose it because it's the same beautiful color as his eyes. Vivia realizes the boy was just a store employee, and Bashel laughs, saying Dennis was worried over nothing. Curious, Aitlier asks what they're all talking about so seriously, so Henrietta explains that Dennis was convinced she had a boyfriend, but before she could finish the sentence, Dennis threatens to ban her from the restaurant after all. Henrietta realizes she may have said too much and quickly promises to buy Dennis a present too someday, but Vivia teases her, saying she should probably focus on paying off her tab first. Aitlier asks Dennis to put on the bracelet right away, so he does and feels genuinely touched by the thoughtful gift. Seeing how happy he looks, Aitlier gets emotional and, wanting to show her love, she gently hugs his leg since she's too small to reach any higher. Meanwhile, Vigo heads to a huge mansion. Inside, he greets the Count and says it's been a long time since they last saw each other. The next day, as the restaurant's regulars finally leave, Dennis feels exhausted from all the cooking and asks Aitlier to clean up outside. Just as she steps out, a man suddenly enters. Dennis tells him they're closed for the day, but the stranger starts crying when he sees Aitlier and bows to her. Henrietta wonders if he's some kind of creep and considers cutting him down, but Vivia tells her not to jump to conclusions. They don't know the full story yet. Dennis is also shocked by what's happening, so the man introduces himself as head butler Stevens, servant of Lady Aitlier Workstadt. Dennis and Henrietta don't recognize the name, but Vivia and Bashel are stunned when they hear it. Dennis wonders if they know something he doesn't, and Vivia asks how he can be so clueless. This embarrasses Dennis, since it's the first time Vivia knows something while he's in the dark. Bashel explains that House Workstadt is the head of the kingdom's largest family of mages, so basically they are the highest lineage of all mages. As Dennis serves Stevens a drink, he wipes his tears at the thought of Aitlier working as a waitress in such a filthy restaurant, so Dennis wonders if he can kick him out, as he finds Stevens irritating. Vivia agrees that the man is quite hard to handle, but he believes they should at least hear him out. Stevens introduces himself properly and says he wishes to pick up Lady Aitlier at the request of the royal court, which confuses Dennis. So Stevens reveals that Aitlier was exiled by her father's brother, Lord Joseph, because she was accused of not having the Workstadt blood, but he reveals that he has found her father's will, according to which she is the rightful owner of House Workstadt, inheriting all his wealth and power. Stevens further tells them that the court has granted her a rehearing on the legitimacy of Lady Aitlier, so he wishes to take her back to Joseph's household without wasting any time. He thinks they should reveal Joseph's iniquity and bring him down, so she can become the official heiress of House Workstadt. Aitlier politely refuses, leaving Dennis wondering why. She remembers how she's always felt afraid around others and once again grabs Dennis's leg. Stevens tries to persuade her, saying she isn't meant to work in such an ordinary restaurant, which looks like a dirty doghouse, but Dennis didn't like this comment. Stevens then asks Dennis to hand her over, reminding Aitlier of the huge difference in status between them. As she gets very emotional, Dennis asks if she doesn't want to go. Aitlier just nods, but he tells her it's important for her future and something she can't ignore. Sooner or later, she'll have to face it, and Dennis believes she should go now. Aitlier finally agrees, on the condition that he goes with her. A little later, Vivia gets ready while the girls assure Dennis they'll take care of the place in his absence. Henrietta feels sad that she won't get to enjoy his delicious cooking for a while, but Dennis reassures her he'll only be gone a few days. Soon, Aitlier arrives, and everyone is impressed to see her all dressed up. Still, she's nervous, telling them she'll finish everything quickly and come back as soon as possible. She admits she no longer wants to go to the royal capital, but she's doing it because Dennis told her it's important. Aitlier keeps mumbling about her fears, and Dennis notices it's the longest sentence she's spoken this whole month. He gently taps her head and reassures her that he'll be right by her side. Just then, Stevens arrives with a carriage. Although he addresses Aitlier respectfully, he calls everyone else commoners, which annoys Dennis and makes him wonder if they can do something about this pompous butler. Vivia, however, remarks that he's not wrong, they are lower in status compared to Aitlier. After a long journey, they finally arrive at the royal capital. Vivia is amazed by the sight, but Dennis tells him not to get too excited, or people will think he's a country bumpkin. Vivia doesn't mind. Meanwhile, Dennis feels nostalgic, remembering how he once thought he would never return to this city. Suddenly, Vivia calls out to him, pointing at the Black's restaurant, the most popular in the capital. Dennis considers visiting later to greet the owner, but changes his mind, still lacking the confidence to face them. As they arrive at their destination, they are greeted by a legal officer named Sestovich, who will be in charge of the deliberation. Dennis introduces himself as Aetlior's guardian, while Vivia declares himself one of the restaurant's most regular customers. Curious about the plan, Dennis asks what will happen next. Sestovich explains that they will test her blood, leaving everyone confused. When Stevens takes out a syringe, Aetlior becomes frightened. She's afraid of needles. Still, since they must follow protocol, they draw her blood, leaving her faint. Dennis then hands Aetlior over to Vivia, who carries her on his back. Meanwhile, Dennis asks Sestovich about Aetlior's situation, as he wants to help her. Sestovich explains that the previous head of the family, Lord Famas, was a master of powerful hypnotic and mind manipulation magic, which greatly impresses Dennis. He goes on to say that such magic can only be mastered by certain bloodlines and those with exceptional talent. He reveals that the Workstat family specialized in hypnosis. This makes Dennis wonder if Aetlior has the same talent, and Sestovich confirms she does. He adds that her father was a great man who saved many lives with his magic. However, it is believed that his younger brother poisoned him and his wife, so he could take their place, and he exiled Aetlior due to doubts of her legitimacy of her lineage. He believes she was robbed of everything, and was so oppressed that she was never allowed to crawl back up again. Sestovich tells Dennis that despite everything, Lord Famas had left a will, and according to that will, the royal government has demanded that the young girl's bloodline should be tested. He leads them to a room where a huge sphere is placed, and he says they will be using this analytical item to prove to the judge that she is the real daughter of Famas. Sestovich places a drop of Aetlior's blood into a device, then adds a sample of Lord Famas's blood, which the royal government has preserved. He explains that if a flower-shaped crystal forms, it proves a first-degree blood relation. He adds that the result would be the same even with her mother's blood, just as he suspected. The test confirms that Aetlior is a direct descendant of Lord Famas and Madame Eliza. Sestovich is confident that they will win the case. A bit later, the royal court convenes to prove Aetlior's legitimacy at the request of the royal government. Among those present is her uncle, Lord Joseph, who mocks Dennis, saying he was kicked out from the Silver Wing. Dennis doesn't recognize him and wonders if he might be one of Vigo's clients. Dennis threatens to punish him for mistreating Aetlior. The judge warns Dennis to be respectful, but when the judge calls him Dennis Blacks, Vivia recalls that the famous restaurant they saw earlier shares the same last name. The judge begins the proceedings, explaining that they have gathered because Lord Famas's will states that Aetlior will inherit all his wealth and properties, while Lord Joseph will receive his knowledge and books. The court's purpose is to determine the will's validity. The opposing lawyer opens his case by claiming that although Aetlior is Lord Famas's daughter, she isn't his legitimate child, which makes Dennis cover Aetlior's ears. The opposing lawyer argues that Aetlior is unworthy of succeeding the leading family of mages. Sestovich responds that this is precisely why they have gathered, to confirm the truth. He announces that they will draw her blood in front of everyone to prove her claim. Lord Joseph objects, saying they shouldn't waste time and declaring himself certain of victory. Dennis loses his temper but manages to control himself, choosing to watch in silence. When Sestovich calls the doctors to draw Aetlior's blood, she feels scared, but Dennis's presence offers her some comfort. The judge hands everyone a stick, asking them to draw lots to select a random person who will activate the magic item. One by one, they try their luck, but none succeed until Dennis wonders who actually got it. Nervously, Stevens raises his hand and steps forward toward the device. He places a drop of Aetlior's blood into it, followed by Sir Famas's blood, which forms a flower-shaped crystal, confirming a match. Dennis and Sestovich both feel relieved. However, when Stevens is instructed to repeat the test using the blood of Lord Famas's wife, Lady Eliza, the result comes back negative, leaving everyone stunned. Sestovich suspects there must be an error and requests a retest, but Lord Joseph objects, saying they can't keep repeating it until they get the result they want. He insists it wouldn't change anything. The head judge agrees and denies Sestovich's request. Joseph then claims that Aetlior may be his brother's daughter, but not the child of his lawful wife, making her ineligible as a direct heir. The judge rules that it has been proven she is not Lord Famas's legitimate daughter, meaning the will is invalid in its current form and must be partially reinterpreted. The judge decides to give all the property and wealth to Lord Joseph, while Aetlior gets to keep the books and knowledge, to which Joseph happily accepts the result. Just then, Dennis suddenly notices blood on the butler's hand, and he realizes something is wrong, so he rushes toward him and grabs him by his collar. Stevens drops the blood-soaked handkerchief, so Dennis notes he dropped his his own blood into the item to make it malfunction. Stevens confessed that Joseph promised to give him back the position of head butler if he did this, but Dennis gets angry and his arms turn into fire. The judge orders Dennis to sit down, saying his behavior is insulting the court. Dennis retorts, asking how he could be insulting the court when they are openly cheating. He picks up 2 sticks, revealing that one is blank, proof that they were all blank from the start. As Stevens had secretly kept the red stick, Dennis realizes the entire thing was planned, and they only brought Aetlier to put on a show. Overcome with rage, he loses his temper, his body igniting with blazing fire. The court guards move in to stop him, but the sight of his fury makes them hesitate in fear. Joseph orders the guards to capture Dennis, but just as he is about to fight them, Vivia steps in from behind and asks what will happen to Aetlier if Dennis ends up in jail. Vivia's words make Dennis calm down, and he then notices that Aetlier is crying. A short while later, outside, Sestovich talks to them about the aftermath of the whole scene. He notes that they have dismissed Dennis's behavior, and he thinks Dennis will also not want to make it a problem. Dennis feels angry at himself as he shouldn't have brought her there, but Sestovich tells them that Aetlier has inherited the knowledge and books of the family, so she should at least check them once. They like the idea and decide to check it out. Soon, they arrive at an abandoned house. Once inside, Sestovich explains that it used to be a library, but in recent years, it has become a storage place. He hopes they might find something valuable there. While walking, Dennis steps on something and warns Aetlier to be careful. Moments later, as she continues forward, she accidentally activates a magic circle and falls into a hidden room beneath it. Once inside, the lights turn on. As Sestovich and Vivia examine the books, they are stunned to discover rare volumes and journals from the old kings, which are priceless. Some of these books are extremely rare, and Vivia thinks it's a vast treasure consisting of precious grimoires, which are at the level of national treasure. He gets really excited to see those books, and he feels he is holding a sealed magical black box, and Sestovich shares the same sentiment. Sestovich notes that they should immediately call an appraiser, so Dennis finally feels happy for Aetlier. Sestovich thinks that it seems Lord Famas was actually trying to have her inherit this instead, but he knew his greedy brother wouldn't let her have it so easily, so he played the whole trick. Dennis asks what she would like to do with the books, and to his surprise, Aetlier says she wants them to be placed in the restaurant. The next morning, Dennis is waiting for Vivia. A few minutes later, Vivia shows up and can't believe he overslept, so he rushes toward the carriage. On his way, he encounters a man who looks exactly like Dennis, though his aura feels different. Just then, Dennis calls out for Vivia to hurry, and the man, upon hearing the name, remarks that it's a nice one. After Vivia leaves, a girl named Fiorens appears, addressing the man as Master Health. She asks who that boy was, and Health explains that he was the companion of a counterpart he had mentioned before. The next day, business at the restaurant is going great. A long line of customers waits outside just to get a seat. Most of them are wizards and mages, which makes Henrietta and Vivia think they must have heard rumors about the magic books Aetlier inherited. Some mages read the books while eating and are shocked to see they actually exist. Until now, these books were just famous legends. Having them here in the open makes people wonder what kind of restaurant this even is. Just then, Dennis yells, telling them he doesn't mind if they read while eating, but once they're done, they need to leave immediately because this is a restaurant, not a library. Dennis works hard to keep up with the flood of orders, and it's clear he's doing a great job. Then, a mage nervously speaks up, saying he has an important question. Noticing Dennis looks upset, the mage first apologizes for bothering him while he's busy. He explains that after reading one of the magic books, he might have found a cure for his wife's illness and asks if he can borrow it. Dennis doesn't answer directly. Instead, he calls Aetlier over to handle it. Aetlier walks up and tells the mage he can borrow the book. Hearing this, other mages also ask to borrow books, but Dennis refuses, saying that was a special case. The mage thanks them sincerely and leaves. As more customers arrive, Dennis decides to speed things up by using magic while cooking. Vivia notices and asks if it's safe to use all his skills at once. Dennis replies that it's the only way to handle so many orders. Soon after, a fresh batch of food is ready to be served. The scene then shifts to a flashback from Dennis's childhood as a poor orphan living on the streets. As he sits alone in the rain, someone drops their wallet, and Dennis runs over to return it to a lady. She's impressed that despite his poor background, he chose to return it instead of stealing it. Surprised, she asks why he gave it back instead of keeping it. Dennis says he thought she would be in trouble without it. As a reward for his good deed, she takes him home and prepares a meal for him. Wearing a chef's uniform, she serves him a plate and asks him to try it. Dennis takes a bite, and his face lights up at how delicious it is. He quickly eats more and starts to tear up. It's been so long since he's had a real home-cooked meal. Back to the present. Dennis wakes up from a coma after hearing his name being called over and over. It turns out what we just saw was part of his dream, where he relived some of his painful childhood memories. As soon as he wakes, Dennis tries to get out of bed, but the others quickly stop him, saying he's still too weak to move. Exiled stands by his side, watching him with deep concern. Even so, Dennis insists he needs to get up and prepare meals for the customers. Bashel firmly tells him to stop worrying about the restaurant and focus on his health. She adds that they already closed the restaurant for the day so he could rest. Hearing that, Dennis lies back down and apologizes for being a burden. He looks at Exiled and asks why she's staring at him like that. The others explain it's because she's been extremely worried, to the point of imagining what would happen if he never woke up again. Dennis chuckles and reassures them that he's much tougher than they think. Soon after, he falls back asleep. They remember the doctor said Dennis just caught a cold, but they suspect it's really because he's been overworking himself. Ever since returning from the capital, he hasn't taken a single break. They decide that when Dennis wakes up next time, they'll give him some medicine and make sure he gets proper rest. The group begins to leave the room, but they stop when they notice Exiled pulling up a chair and sitting down beside Dennis. When they ask what she's doing, she simply says she's going to stay there and wait for him to wake up. Later, Vivia, Henrietta, and Bashel are still upset about Dennis's condition and wish they could do something for him. After thinking for a while, Bashel comes up with the idea of making some akiu for Dennis to eat when he wakes up. She believes that if it tastes good, it will help bring back his energy. Vivia likes the idea, saying food is closely tied to good health. Henrietta also agrees and suggests they hurry to get everything ready. But things take an odd turn when Vivian notices Henrietta dressed in full plate armor. He asks why she's wearing it, and she replies that it's because they'll be using fire and other dangerous tools. Vivia can't help but wonder just how much fire she's planning to use for a simple bowl of aku. Henrietta then goes into the kitchen to look for ingredients and pulls out a huge slab of meat, saying they just need to grill it and it will be delicious. Vivia realizes she's completely forgotten they're supposed to be making akiu. When Henrietta draws her sword to cut the meat, Vivia stops her, worried she might slice the entire kitchen in half. The two of them start bickering back and forth. Bashel walks in and is shocked at how quickly things have gotten out of hand in the short time she was away. Just then, Sedovich bursts through the door. Vivia turns around, shocked to see him appear so suddenly. Upstairs, Exiled is still by Dennis's side, patiently waiting for him to wake up. She notices his ice pack has slipped off, so she gets up, checks his temperature, and frowns. He's still burning up. She starts blaming herself for how exhausted he is, remembering how Dennis has always gone out of his way to protect and defend her. Feeling grateful for him, she gently puts the ice pack back on his forehead with a small smile, whispering that she hopes he wakes up soon. Meanwhile, Dennis is deep in another dream about his childhood. Young Dennis is seen jumping out of a window after playing a prank on the sous chef by chopping his cabbage so finely it turned into powder. The woman who took him in, the head chef at Black's restaurant. She listens as her sous chef complains that Dennis should be more grateful since she took him off the streets. He suggests she scold Dennis to prevent it from happening again, but she simply says Dennis is too stubborn for lectures. She believes he'll grow up on his own someday. Later that day, young Dennis runs excitedly toward the main dining hall with a plate of fried rice, thinking he's just perfected his recipe. He enters, looking for someone to taste it. The smell catches the attention of a high-ranking customer, who calls him over and praises Black's restaurant for training chefs so young. She takes a bite, but immediately recoils at the awful taste. The sous chef rushes over, glaring at Dennis and asking what he's done this time, while maids hurry to assist the lady and apologize for the trouble. The head chef arrives, curious about the commotion. The sous chef explains that Dennis served a customer something strange. She sees Dennis holding the plate and immediately understands the situation. Taking the dish from him, she casts a magic spell on it and places it back in front of the customer. The woman hesitates, remembering the first taste, but decides to try again, and to her surprise, it's now delicious. Wondering how that's possible, she asks the head chef, who simply says Dennis forgot the secret ingredient. That evening, Dennis approaches his guardian looking guilty. Apologizing for using a strange spell on the dish, she isn't angry. She just tells him it's fine, as long as he now understands the importance of using the right spells. Dennis bursts into tears, admitting that at the time, he truly thought he'd perfected his fried rice. rice. She comforts him, saying it's alright and he just needs to study more. After wiping his tears, Dennis asks how she managed to fix the meal so quickly. He guesses she figured out he'd used both disassembly and combining skills, but he still can't understand how she repaired it so fast. She replies that it was easy after all, she's a fried rice legend. Hearing that, Dennis smiles and declares he wants to become a fried rice legend too. Back in the present, Dennis is still asleep, and Aetlier has dozed off while watching over him. Downstairs, the others are still trying to figure out why Sedovich showed up so suddenly. He explains that he's a magic enthusiast and came to read one of the magic books Aetlier inherited. There's one book in particular he's been eager to see, and the moment he heard it was at their restaurant, he rushed over. But after hearing Dennis is sick and they're cooking for him, Sedovich says the book can wait. He wants to help them make the dish instead. He asks what they're making, and they say it's akyu, but Sedovich interrupts, saying they should focus on cooking the rice first before making akyu. He explains that only after preparing a perfect batch of rice can the true akyu making process begin. For now, he says, the main discussion should be about how to cook the rice perfectly using magic. Vivia and Bashel get excited by the idea, but Henrietta doesn't seem in the mood. Sedovich mentions that before he followed the path of law, he was a passionate researcher. Hearing this, Bashel suggests using flame magic for cooking. However, she points out that heating strength varies depending on the user's imagination and skill. Vivia agrees, saying that if the flame is uneven, the rice will end up either soggy or too dry. Sedovich then suggests using the spectral flame from Phantom Fire, explaining that with Phantom Fire, the heat output depends entirely on the magical energy used. Henrietta is already feeling overwhelmed by all the magic talk and just stares at them. Then she hears them mention using akoj in the recipe, which confuses her even more. She doesn't think akoj is needed at all. The three continue debating on which method to use, but Henrietta is so lost that she just sits down. After a long argument, they finally reach a decision. They'll use both Phantom Fire and normal flame. Sedovich says that any heating differences caused by double casting can be solved by using a pot with a magical catalyst to stabilize the heat. He concludes this is the best way to cook perfect rice with magic. Vivia and Bashel cheer at the decision, but then they wonder if they can also use magic to turn the rice into delicious akyu. Before diving into that, Vivia suggests taking a break since the discussion is making him dizzy. Bashel agrees. Henrietta sips her tea, still feeling left out, and comments that magic is much more complicated than she imagined. Just then, Polvo walks in, saying he heard Dennis is sick, so he brought a magazine as a gift. Henrietta brightens up, saying that's very kind of him, until Polvo adds that because of Dennis's condition, he'll be selling it at half price. Vivia immediately scolds him for still charging Dennis even though he's sick. Meanwhile, Henrietta flips through the magazine and spots a picture of a sleek rice cooker. Polvo says that with this rice cooker, making delicious rice is easy. Henrietta doubts it can make akyu, but Polvo tells her it has an akyu mode. She asks whether there's any point in using both Phantom Fire and Flame before making akyu, but Polvo says that's pointless. If you just boil water and throw in uncooked rice, you'll end up with akyu. The others are shocked that the process is nothing like they imagined. Polvo warns that this is why letting people who don't cook into the kitchen is dangerous. Just then, Aetlier walks in. They ask about Dennis, and she says his fever has gone down. When she learns they're making akyu for him, she suggests adding eggs to make it more nutritious. Henrietta loves the idea. Aetlier cracks eggs into a bowl and whisks them with a special technique. The others aren't surprised at her skill. She learned it from Dennis himself, but they quickly get sidetracked, talking about food preferences. Bashel says he loves sweet tamagoyaki, while Vivia prefers the bitter kind. They ask Henrietta about her own likes and dislikes. Henrietta thinks for a moment, then says there's one thing she absolutely can't eat: leather shoes. Vivia and Bashel are stunned at how random that is. Henrietta explains that in her family, leather shoes are considered edible. Her father always said they're made from animal hides, so they must be safe to eat. Still, she dislikes the taste. Vivia and Bashel awkwardly pat her shoulder and suggest they change the subject. Later that night, Dennis wakes up just as Aetlier enters. A few moments later, she serves him the egg akyu they all helped prepare. Dennis takes a bite and is reminded of his childhood. He says he likes it because it's warm and comforting. Aetlier is happy to hear this. He asks if she made it, and she says she prepared the eggs, but Polvo made the akyu. Upon hearing this, Dennis shouts at the top of his lungs, demanding to know why they let Polvo of all people handle that part. That was episode 7. Subscribe to not miss the next part and watch the next video on screen.